working with international partners is probably the most interesting part of the space station job that I had. There are a lot of things the partners help us with and a lot of things they challenge us with. And a lot of those lessons from space station we've been able to apply in Orion, and I can talk about that a little bit. One of the things the partners do best is they challenge us on the things that we think are absolutely necessary. They challenge our experience and our culture because they have their own experience, especially the Russians who were successful too. They'd flown people. So that was one of the most, I think, stressful, but one of the most revealing things is when the Russians, we would take something that we're so used to doing. We landed on the moon, we got a shuttle, right? We're doing a space station. We say, this process is really important. And they go, well, we don't do that. And here they had flown people for actually longer than we have. So I think it was great for NASA because it tested us. It made us really justify and look hard at the things we thought were critical. And some of the hardest jobs were, though, when we felt we were really correct, that there was a better way to do this and a safer way to do this, that we had to learn ways of convincing them, right? You don't order the Russians because they don't work for us, right? We're partners. And so a lot of that is getting a rapport, getting a relationship built on trust and a respect. When they respect that you know what you're talking about, and then you start building those dialogues, and they need to always feel like you have the overall integrated story at heart. In other words, they need to feel like you're out for everybody. You're trying to make the whole enterprise work. You're not just out for the U.S. And once they feel that way, you can be effective. So one of the jobs I had was actually negotiating directly with the head of Energia, or the head of the space station for Energia, negotiating requirements and resolving issues. That was a huge job, a lot of fun, difficult. And then I branched out into working, when I moved up in the management chain, then I managed the teams that also worked with the Japanese and the Europeans and the Canadians. Each of them was a little bit different in their style. The other partners had never really had their own programs, so they were always kind of a junior partner to NASA in a sense, but they also had their own professional pride. They also had their own constraints we had to work through and negotiate. And each one was a little bit different, but it was a lot of fun. One of the things you learn when you make these deals with the partners is that they have their own constraints, and it can be politically, like the Europeans have their own process for getting different subcontractors involved, depending on how much each country contributes to the total dollar. So that can complicate the integration. They also usually go out with fixed price deals when they make a deal, which is very hard in a development program, because development program you need to have some flexibility because you're going to find surprises. And they tend to be very rigid because they're in these boxes, which makes it hard to negotiate with them when you do find things that need to be fixed. I think one of the things when people look at space station, they sometimes say, why did we make some of these deals? I remember one particular time where I had someone from headquarters come and ask me, this was in about 2004, and they were starting the big exploration program under Steidl, and they wanted to come down and get a list of things so that we would not make the same mistakes we had made with the partners in space station. So it was a funny way to come at it. And I guess when you come at it and you're not a part of the process, you think, wow, some of these deals are fairly complicated, right? And how did we ever get into that? But it turns out that, in my experience, the ones that I dealt with, necessity is the mother of invention. We had budget issues, and we had partners that had capability. And we had partners that owed us money for one reason or another, because they pay us back for shuttle launches or for infrastructure costs on space station. So this was really a form of currency, in a sense, that we could use to alleviate other budget problems we had. So we got into those deals because we had the budget constraints, and we had partners that had capability. We didn't just wake up and say, let's make a complicated deal. It was because these were the choices we had in order to make the space station work. So the way I look at it is not, let's look at it and do it differently so we don't get into complicated deals. I think the way we need to look at it is the deals are going to be complicated. Figure out how to manage them, to figure out how to mitigate the risks as you go forward. So when we made this, Gerstenmaier recently made a deal for Orion, where we ESA would provide basically the propulsion and thermal heat rejection part of the service module of Orion as a common systems ops cost deal for space station. In other words, they owe us money because of the infrastructure. They've paid us back with ATV launches, so Bill said, well, rather than give me another ATV, how about you provide this service module package for the first Orion? Well, again, we have budget issues. Again, in the long run, we know partners are going to be part of exploring space, so it's a great start for that. That's why we did it. It's a fairly complex deal. It's a fairly complex integration because the service module, that piece never flies by itself. It's an integrated system. But we did it for those reasons, and it's a great plan for the future. But it does make our integration problem more complicated. So knowing what we knew in space station, we identified. We worked the interfaces as best we could before the deal was made, because we had a design for a service module ourselves, and because we had worked with the Europeans on ATVs in Columbus before, we were able to communicate well, I think, on the risks. What are the risks in the schedule? What are the risks in the development? And so I think we were able to characterize very well for Bill what we were getting into when we made this deal, both schedule risk, cost risk, and so forth. So now we're a year into it, and I think we did. We were able to predict the future pretty well. So still a great thing to do. Adds complexity, but the space station taught us how to make those deals, right, and how to characterize and mitigate the risks as you go forward. So I think that's the biggest part of how we use the space station experience on Orion for partner integration.